Well, I'm glad you're here this time. I hope you enjoy what I'm about to present to you. I have recently, very recently, had the opportunity to meet someone that I was so profoundly blown away by in my conversation with him that I asked him if he would be willing to have a chat with me. His name is Nate Johnson. He's out of St. Louis. And I originally met him when I was working with North Carolina Realtors when they were creating their Fair Housing Academy. And I am just truly in awe of this man who I don't know anybody that has more history of the issues of race and real estate in our country. And the history is a lot. And of course, it's been more talked about recently because of so many things that have gone on. And it's a profoundly important thing for me personally. But when you meet Nate Johnson, you're not going to forget that you met Nate Johnson, and he's a practicing realtor. He was state realtor of the year very recently. But more importantly, he has an amazing ability to explain and simplify and give you a deeper depth of understanding of what happened to the African American society and people of color historically when it comes to real estate. And some things that I found out, I had no idea. And I like to believe I'm a pretty good historian, but I had no idea. And so he was very gracious to allow me to have this interview with him. I was on the road when we did it, and it was just it's always awe-inspiring to talk to this man. So I hope you're inspired. I hope you learn things you didn't know before, because when it comes to issues of diversity and DEI and all of that, we have to be better at making things change. And I'm hoping that this interview will help inspire you to do just that. Nate Johnson, I can't tell you how excited I am to spend time with you. I've only gotten to know you recently, but I have discovered you're one of my favorite humans on the planet. So I reached out to you with a request, a very personal request that you and I could spend some quality time talking about something that means an awful lot to me, because I discovered you through North Carolina Realtors Fair Housing Academy. But then I've gotten to dig deeper, and I just find everything you are is remarkable. And I'm honored that I get the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you. So what I want to talk about is just some of the stuff that created so much that was contributed to the North Carolina Realtors Fair Housing Academy. And so I think probably of all of the things that I did for that entire program, my favorite piece was the history. And so as I was thinking about what we could talk about, the first thing I wanted to talk with you about was talk to me a little bit. Well, first and foremost, you're a realtor. How long have you been in real estate? And then what was the impetus behind your desire to have a better understanding of the history of fair housing issues in real estate, if you don't mind?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. Thanks for inviting me to come and spend some time with you, and thanks so much for your kind words. You make me blush. That's for sure.
It's all
So
true,
yeah,
by the way. I don't ever lie. I don't fabricate. Anybody knows me is going to tell you whatever I say is real. Sometimes it's kind of weird, but it's always real. So thank you for that. I appreciate you so much. I'm so grateful. But please, I apologize for interrupting again.
you're fine. You're fine. So I have been a realtor now for 23 years, almost 24 years, getting ready to go into the 24th year next year. And I got my license back in 1999 and was working with a broker whose one of his claims to fame was how home buyer seminars. Now, this was 100 years ago, as you know. This is before the internet. This was certainly before Zoom and all of these technologies. So when we would have these home buyer seminars, people would come from all over the St. Louis region to attend the seminars, and where we talk about the steps involved in buying your home or selling your home. We'd have the home selling seminars as well. And I got to tell you, he was incredible in the way that how he was able to capture an audience. We would do these seminars, and just imagine, we'd do the seminars on a Thursday and a Saturday. And at each one of these seminars, we'd have over 100 people, um, every single month. And he got to a point where he got his radio show. He had a radio show on the local station.
Wow.
He got it syndicated. So he was in several other markets around the country. So then we started traveling a little bit to perform these seminars. And I was just kind of part of the road show in terms of, I was always, expressed interest and just, paying attention. And, one day he got sick, and like literally got sick during the middle of one of his
Oh
presentations.
no. Wow.
And he goes, Nate, I gotta go. You've been standing here for the last couple years watching this stuff. Take it from here. And so I got up there having never done this, and
Wow.
delivered the rest of his seminar. Even told his jokes, I think. Um, but so for me, real estate was an eye-opening experience for me to get involved with. The first time I ever saw the ocean was after I became a realtor, traveling with him, down to Florida. So I just, growing up, we were broke. We were broke. We were, food stamps, the whole nine. And we were financially broke, but we had a lot of love. Let me
I
tell you
love
that. So
that.
yes, we had a lot of love. That's for sure. Um, so once I became a realtor and I started to help people achieve the goal of home ownership and helping people sell their homes, I I started to I started to realize, and this was like pointed out to me, that um not everybody has the same opportunities. And this was something that I just wasn't aware of prior to getting in the business. And a good friend of mine, who was the president of the local NARAB chapter here in St. Louis, National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which is the oldest African American trade association in the country, the Realtists.
Mhm.
And this organization was founded in 1947 at a time when African Americans were not allowed to be realtors.
Yeah.
And I got the amazing opportunity to learn and hear stories from not only her, but from her peers, as well as her father, who is an extraordinary man. And he was someone who founded his real estate company at a time when, this is back in the 1950s when
Yeah.
he started his real estate company, and he wanted to help African Americans find a better way. He wanted to help them achieve the goal of home ownership. So on a at least a monthly basis, I would study at his knee, so to speak, and listen to
Wow.
his stories and him
Wow.
sharing with me all, the history of some of these things that have transpired that sort of have led us to where we're at today, or where we were at then,
Right.
which quite honestly isn't so far from where we're at today. Um, and so that just kind of, that sort of ignited a spark in me, which made me really want to learn more about this history. And I started studying from there. I started to really reading the books, and asking him about resources, and finding my own resources. And before you know it, I really started to understand that, what, there may have been a reason why I never lived in a home that we owned growing up.
Mm.
I didn't realize that at the time, that there would have been anything other than we just weren't homeowners.
Wow.
There was a reason that the majority of people in my community did not own the home in the neighborhood that I grew up in. And that, I never even met a realtor, nor really knew what one was until I became an adult, because it just wasn't my experience. I wasn't surrounded by home ownership. I wasn't surrounded by realtors. So, it just really made me understand that not everybody has the same experience. And that's one of the things that I try to bring across to groups that I speak with today, is
Mhm.
that we have different experiences,
Mhm.
and we can't assume that your lived experience is the same as mine, and vice versa, because we all have diversity and variety of experiences that have brought us to the place that we're at today. And it's my goal to help people understand that we do have these different experiences, and that home ownership was not necessarily something that was just a given, which it is for many Americans.
Mhm. So I have to, sorry for my throat, but I wonder, because I've thought about this. I was having a conversation with someone recently on a different video I was doing, and he brought up realtists. And I asked him, I said, how much do you know about the realtists? Where did that come from? And he actually knew, which made me very happy because I almost expected him to not know. So have you ever thought about the level of the real estate realtor population? Do they really understand the foundation of the realtists? Where did they come from? How did that start? What are your thoughts there?
No, I don't believe that your average realtor understands that. Your average realtor doesn't understand
Mm.
the sort of the genesis of the Fair Housing Act and how it came to be and where we sit today as it relates to fair housing. I believe that your average realtor believes that, hey, the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. That ended it all. That was it. That solved the problem. Yeah, does racism still exist? I think that people would say, oh, sure, racism exists, but it doesn't really affect people. They don't understand the sort of institutional challenges that have been created and that have persisted over the years and that are still persisting today.
Mhm.
And when I'm talking with folks, and the reason why I can say that confidently, because I talk with your average realtor. I'm blessed to have the opportunity to travel all over the country talking with realtors about a variety of issues, and fair housing is one of the things that I speak about. And there's not a a single session, a single class that I instruct or talk that I give that I don't have someone come up to me and say, Nate, I had no idea.
No idea. No
No
idea.
idea. Yeah. And I think that the majority of people are like that. They just don't have any idea. I had no idea until I purposely,
Mm.
sought out the information. It's not something that people are born with, this knowledge. So if it's not something that, you're passionate about or you're somehow sort of drawn to, then you're not going to get that information, because quite honestly, it's not something that our realtor organization says, hey, everybody, guess what? This is
Do
what we
that.
did. And, here, take a look at it, read this book or do this. That's just not something that we do.
Right.
Yeah, we've done a much better job over
Yes.
the last several years at taking ownership of the sort of the sordid history that we have in terms of fair housing. However, it's still not something that we're talking about every single day, and it's not something that's part of new member orientation necessarily.
No, oh my gosh, no. And you know what? I have to share a very personal story. And it's an interesting one because, again, something I learned from you and through doing the Fair Housing Academy. My mother worked for Levitt and Sons for 25 years. She started working for them in Levittown, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia, Bristol, Pennsylvania area, and then continued working for them in New Jersey. But I never knew until our conversation that Levittown, New York had restricted covenants. So where my brain went, because my dad was a World War II hero, paratrooper, jumped into southern France on purpose out of a the engine was running and he jumped out anyway. And that's not my thing. But his best friend and the man whose life he saved in Belgium was a Navajo Indian.
Hmm.
And when I realized that Marshall Clay, an amazing man that I got to meet, Marshall Clay would not have been able to buy a home in Levittown, New York, but my dad would have. Knowing that, I'm an emotional girl. I just said, excuse me very much. I don't understand this. It literally crushed me. And if I recall correctly, I think I asked you if those covenants remained in Pennsylvania, New Jersey. Do you remember that conversation? Or do you know that? I don't know.
Well, so what I know is that that based on the Shelley versus Kramer decision, that in eff- that effectively made restrictive covenants unenforceable by law. However, they could be privately enforced, and
Right.
this was 1948 Shelley versus Kramer Supreme Court decision. And so it was so although there was not going to be any judicial action to enforce these restrictive covenants, they would be privately enforced, or they could be privately enforced. And in fact, they were privately enforced well into the 70s, even the 80s. And quite honestly, even today, you can say that there's an understanding about some communities and who's going to be welcome in the community and who's not going to be welcome. Levittown, Pennsylvania, for example, was integrated in 1957.
Mhm.
And, the first couple, who was William and Daisy Myers, who moved in there, they're the type of neighbors that anybody would want.
Absolutely.
He was an engineer, she was a school teacher. They just want to put food on their table, send their kids to good schools, and live their lives. The challenge, of course, with the neighbors was that they were black, and as a result, you would expect, I would expect that if a new neighbor moves in, you're going to bring them flowers, bring them a cake, or let me know if there's anything that I can do for you to welcome you to the neighborhood. That's not how the Myers family was welcomed. They were welcomed with 2 weeks of rioting.
Oh my
They were crosses burned in yards. There were bricks thrown through windows. There were all these things. They were terrorized for the years that they were there. And and this is and to me, one of the things that there's a fascinating documentary called Crisis in Levittown. And this was I think it came out in 1958 or 59. Anyhow, it interviewed several people it was interviewing people while this was happening, while these riots were taking place. And one of the videos that I show a little clip of that during one of my presentations, where you've got one woman who's speaking. I could never welcome them into the neighborhood. I bought the home in this neighborhood. I understood it was going to be an all-white neighborhood, and I was happy to do that. I would never accept them socially. No, we'll do whatever we can to get them out legally. Right. Now, of course, at that point, there was no legal way to get them out, because racially based restrictive covenants had already been
God.
deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So that's one perspective. And then you've got a perspective of another woman who says, I'm sure that they're going to be fine. We welcome them into the neighborhood, and I'm sure they're going to be good neighbors, just like everybody else is good neighbors. And, we can't, the violent people, oh, they'll be okay, that kind of thing. So you've got two different perspectives there, one of violence and vitriol, and then the other of being much more welcoming.
Mhm.
And the challenge that you've got there is the woman and the people like her who want to be welcoming are sort of met at the road by the folks that are the violent types. Because if you imagine her taking over a cake or a pie to the Myers house,
Yes,
what
yes, yes,
happened is that
yes,
now her family's getting crosses burned in their
yes,
yard.
yes.
They're getting bricks through their window. They can no longer, have their kids play with the other kids. You can't have afternoon tea with the ladies anymore. So your life is upset by, speaking that truth. And so as a result, I think throughout history, what ends up happening is this sort of um, vocal minority wins out over the quiet majority,
Mhm.
because the quiet majority does just that. They stay quiet because although they're not in alignment with the sort of with what the bad actors are doing, they
Mhm.
also don't want to have problems themselves. They don't want to disrupt their own status quo.
Right, right, right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
yeah, so that's the big challenge there. And it's like Dr. King said, Dr. King said in talking about the civil rights movement, he's like, this time will not be remembered by the violence and vitriol of all the bad people, but by the appalling silence of the good people.
Yes, yes, yes,
And I
yes.
think that that's what we deal with then. That's what we deal with today as well.
You know, I don't know if I share this with you, but I was in the first group of educators to be a part of the new NAR implicit bias class. And one of the questions that came to us all as instructors was a very simple question, and it was, "Why are you here? You know, what was your thing? What created your desire or need to be in this group?" And I'll share with you, Nate, I broke down crying because I grew up in the 60s. I was in high school in the 60s. And I try to explain to people that there are things that are etched in my brain, etched in my heart that will never go away. That are, I believe, have made me fundamentally the woman I am. And I literally broke down crying. And you probably know Maurice Taylor. I adore that man. And we were partnered up to do a workshop together. And he said to me, "Ginny, I never would have known that of you, because when you walk in a room, you kind of, yeah, well, I am that person. But the person that's my heart, the part of my brain that I could never conceive of, why? There was never any logic to me. And yet the pain, it still hurts my heart. So it's one of the reasons why I do my best to make change. You know, I do my best being me to talk to someone like you and say, let's publish this. Let's make this, other people find it. Let me talk to my own family members from the Bronx. And are you aware? Do you understand? Have any concept? You know, that's the only way that change is going to be made. And you know, I will admit to you, I'm in awe of your history and your desire. And you know, so talk to me a little bit. Talk to us, if you will. How do we help the rest of our community change? What do we collectively need to know as a group? And if I may, the last part, which is the hard one, is, what are your greatest frustrations?
So what do we need to know? I think that, if we start there with what we need to know as a group, I heard this once, and I guess I would summarize it by saying that minds are like parachutes. They work best when they're open,
Mm.
right? And I think that that's really at the genesis of what we need to do to move forward. We need to develop more of an open mind, because often we have our own set of beliefs. We have our own history. We have how we've been taught things, how we understand things. And the way that most of us understand things is different than perhaps the reality of another person's experience or what has really happened. Because we like to be the hero of our own story. And so when there are things that are contrary to that, those are the things that we like to misremember, or that we, sort of reframe throughout history and make them out to be not as bad as they were, because
Mm.
we really weren't that bad. We really didn't do that. And I think that that's part of the challenge, is that we like to misremember things, and misremember through the oral history, misremember through the words that are written in books, the movies, and the portrayals that are made in those. All of those things are the sort of the food and the fuel for our beliefs and for our understanding, because it gets reinforced. And you mentioned the bias, by the NAR bias override course, which I'm also an instructor of. And one of the things that they talk about in that course is how our brain likes to be
Yes.
right.
Yes.
Our brain likes to be right. So we're looking for information that confirms the belief that we already have. We're not looking for things that are going to counter that. Most of us aren't.
Right.
We're looking for things that confirm what we already believe. So if we already believe that things are this way, or we believe that this group of people doesn't have, doesn't have the level of wealth of this group because they are lazy. They didn't take advantage of opportunities.
Mm,
They're
mm,
just not as smart. Things like that. That's easy. That's easy to say, oh, they just didn't work as hard. So I can feel good about my trajectory because I work harder than those people. Or
mm,
I'm smarter than those people, right? Because it's a way of getting off the hook of what has really transpired to create this racial wealth gap that we see in our country, and certainly the home ownership gap as well. All of those things, and when we sort of look at that a little deeper and start to really help people understand that these things were intentional and these things were done purposefully,
mhm.
often people will have very the reactions are can be shocking
Well,
because
if I can
those
jump in,
yeah.
I never knew, I never knew, uh, until you shared the story about Abraham Lincoln and what his plans were, and I didn't know that. And what happened with me is the exploding head emoji moment.
Mhm.
The lack of knowledge fuels the problem, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. That's it right there, and that's where I was saying that when we open our minds and be receptive
Yes.
of the information,
Yes.
because there's more than just the education, because people have to be willing to receive the information,
Yes, yes, yes.
because if you're sitting there with your arms crossed, not listening and saying this is wrong, oh no, I'm not listening to that, then you're not going to be any further along than you were when you walked into the room.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that one of one of the things that I work very hard to bring across in talks and presentations and classes that I instruct is that I'm not here to blame people.
No.
It's not about that. It's about how do we how do we move forward
Right.
from where we're at today to create more equitable outcomes. And the only way that we can move forward from where we're at is to understand how we got here.
Yes,
And the
yes,
only way to
yes.
understand how we got here is to really, take, is really allow ourselves to be open to the education and the knowledge that's out there that relates to the history of our country,
Mhm,
and certainly the real estate laws and
mhm.
what we did as realtors. And I'm often telling people, I say, look, I talk about we all the time. I'm a realtor. I recognize that as a black guy, my father was not, he wouldn't have been able to be a realtor
Right.
in our association at the time that he was coming of age. So that opportunity wasn't there for him. But yet I still say we have to atone for what we
Yes,
have done as realtors.
yes,
And
yes.
the reason I say we and include myself in that, because I'm a realtor.
Right.
So this is just as much my association as it is anyone else's.
Yeah.
So as a result, I'm as responsible as everyone else to fix it and
Mm,
to make it the best association it can possibly be. Isabel Wilkerson, in her book Cast, said that she used a fabulous analogy about a home. And if you buy 100-year-old house, you didn't build that house. But guess what? You got to fix the roof. You got to update the plumbing and the electrical, and you've got to improve it. It's your house. You now own it. And this is like us with the realtor organization. It's our house. We own that house now. So it's up to us to improve it or maintain it. The choice is ours.
mhm. Yeah, I heard all of and forgive me, I'm saying yes a lot, but this is me, and I there's that. I'm not really a very Pollyanna kind of gal. But I'm a New York person. We don't do Pollyanna stuff, but I do have, and I've said this in pretty much everything I've been when I talk about this subject. There's that little fragment. There's just a little glimmer in my heart, in my mind, that things are finally changing in the right way. Baby steps, but I'm finally starting to, I believe, finally starting to see change. And I can share with you, every single time I teach anything about this subject, I've been honored to do a lot of home with diversity classes, the Fair Housing Academy for North Carolina Realtors. What I say to every student when I'm finishing is that every one of you that are here with me and have been with me must decide to be the change, to affect change, to take action, to be brave enough to step in when something's not okay, and not accept excuses any longer, and not accept status quo. And I could be wrong, and it's only a glimmer. It's a tiny glimmer, but I believe maybe finally things are moving in the right direction. Am I crazy? Do you feel that? Is that, by the way, please don't for a fragment of time think that my belief that there's glimmers mean that we've accomplished a whole lot. But the glimmer is a start. Am I wrong in my thoughts?
I think that, I years ago, probably before I had children, I thought that, maybe naively, that, by the time my children are adults, racism isn't going to be a thing.
Never said that one.
I and I not that it wouldn't be a thing, but it was going to be something that was in the dark corners of society, that it was not going to be something that was on display, and that was, that my kids would have to endure at the same level that, my father or myself have had to endure. And what I've realized is that, yeah, it's just not true. I realize that, yes, change is happening,
Yes.
but it's at a snail's pace. It
Yes.
really
Yes.
is.
Yes.
Because when we look at, when we look at where we're at today in 2022, are we better off than where we were at 1969 when the passage of the Fair Housing Act occurred? Absolutely, for
Yes.
sure.
Let's take that one for a little tiny fragment. Let's just take a tiny bit. Yeah.
But we still have so many challenges.
Yes, yes.
And some of the things are, and some of the history is repeating itself too. I often will tell the story going back to 1865, and 1866, when we had the first Fair Housing Act. We had the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and that was supposed to eliminate housing discrimination, that barred discrimination based on race. So one might think, or should have thought, hey, that's it. We've got the policy that's going to do it. The law, racism over, housing discrimination, a thing of the past. But of course, we know that that didn't happen. And the reason for that is because as much as we have to change laws and policies, we really have to change hearts and minds.
Right.
That's what has to occur, because people are going to find ways around it if they don't want to do it. So what we have to do is really compel people to understand that, hey, when we embrace diversity, it benefits all of us.
Everybody.
Not a zero-sum game. And I think that that's one of the challenges. And that's where often people on one side of the spectrum are able to win others to their side, because the thought process is, if they have it, that means that you won't get it. And so that brings people onto that team of saying, no, this is the way we want it, because I don't want you to have it, because if you have it, that means I'm not going to get it, or my kids aren't going to get it. And if we can get to the realization that we all can win, then that destroys that argument. And then everybody works together to create, the sort of beautiful outcomes that all of our communities deserve. And I believe that's possible. And maybe this is me in my lived experience. After everything that I've seen, read, and understood, I still have that belief. It's like Anne Frank said, despite everything, I believe that at heart, people are good. And I believe that too. And that's why I do this work.
But you see, what you just described is why ultimately I believe it can change, because people like you and people like me and other people that I know who have that ultimate
core belief that it can change, it can get better. And those of us who are charge leaders, if you will, are doing things like we're doing together, and North Carolina's Fair Housing Academy, to bring it forward, to have people see. I want to share a personal story, because there are so many reasons why this matters to me. Obviously, I've never had the experiences that you have, but I have certain things that were like, excuse me very much. I'm a singer, although frankly lost my voice recently, but doesn't matter. I've been singing since I was 3 years old in front of people. And of course, some of my very favorite singers on the whole planet are people like Ella and, all of that original, Dinah Washington and all of those folks. And one of the things I love to share when I'm teaching at Home of Diversity is the very simple thing is that, yeah, all those white folks wanted to go sing, see them sing, hear them sing, wanted to be entertained with them. But that same person that was just being idolized because of their talent still couldn't go to the same restaurant or drink out of the same fountain or go to the same, any of that. And that just pisses me off. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But you see, what you're doing far more than I think the better we are at opening eyes and sharing stories, the better shot we have. And it's fragmental. It's snail's pace. And I live in California, so we have snails. I know how fast they don't move. It's still something, a tiny, tiny fragment of something. And we just have to keep working at it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mhm.
We just,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, well, I am truly, genuinely honored and somewhat emotional to have this conversation with you, Nate. Your knowledge and your explanations and the way you present that data, everybody needs to hear it. I'm hopeful that just this little fragment of time we spent together, roughly 30 minutes or so spent together, will indeed get people's eyes to open up. I want to make sure at the end of our time, our video, people can reach out to you and say, I want to know more. How do I get more? Where are you going to be? And any little tiny fragment of anything I can do, I want to do that. Tremendous honor, my friend, to have this time with you. I personally am profoundly grateful for who you are as a man and who you are as an educator and the changes you're making. And I know you're just going to keep doing that. And I believe you're one of the change makers in our industry and our society today in 2022, 23 and beyond, because we need folks like you in our industry. So thank you. From the core of my being, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Nate.
Well, thank you, Jenny. Again, thanks for those kind words. And I think that at the end of the day, we we all have an opportunity to do something. We can't do everything, but we can do something.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can do often is educating those around us.
Yes.
And then it spreads, and that's, it's like Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world.
Yes.
Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's where we exist in this.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you. I might, if I may, reach back out and say, let's talk about something else, because I'm kind of a relentless New Yorker person. So just be prepared for that. But Nate, I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I can't wait for others to hear what you had to say, and hopefully they reach out to you. But my sincere gratitude to you, Nate, and I will hopefully see you very soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jenny. Take care.
You too, my friend. Bye.
Well, I hope that was impactful to you, because it's truly, every time I talk to him, I'm again in awe. He's a remarkable man and a very down-to-earth, simple man who just wants to share history that we need to know more about. So I hope you learned more things. I hope you carry it forward, and that you dig deeper and have a deeper understanding of what actually happened, and be the change. We hear that it's become cliche, I say it a lot when I teach classes like at Home with Diversity and Bias Override, where I'm speaking specifically to the issue of how we all have to be the change. We all have to step up. We have to be brave, and we have to see change happen. I have hope for the first time pretty much ever, that's kind of come over the last couple of years, that we are going to indeed see change. And I am seeing change now, but it's never enough. And there's a lot, a lot to catch up on. So I hope he inspired you, and I look forward to seeing you the next time.